It all started just over a week ago. I had just gotten off work and I was going to pick up dinner and head to my girlfriend Cassandra's place. We had been together for a year and things had been going great. Cass really liked the Mexican food from a small little restaurant by E Street. It was a bit of a distance away from downtown and the neighborhood was a little bit sketchy. But they made good food, so I didn't mind getting it for us when either of us had a hankering. It was a little late for dinner since I had been working late, but Cass did not mind waiting up for me and I called in an order and was happy to hear that they were still open. I parked and stepped out on the curb, hesitating as I heard something strange. It sounded like a small commotion near the playground that was on the other side of the street. It seemed like someone was trying to speak quietly but was not doing a great job since I could hear them from where I was at. I couldn't quite make out the specifics, but somebody sounded upset. Only one voice was audible and it was too dark to see who was speaking, but I thought it might be someone rambling to themselves while under the influence of something. I shrugged and figured it wasn't my business and I went in to collect my order. When I got back outside and started walking back to my car, I froze when I heard something more clearly than before. I listened closely and I heard it again. It was desperate, but still strangled and hushed, like somebody was trying to cry out but still whispering, "Help me." It was already dark and the minimal light from the street lamps barely illuminated the sidewalk, much less the shrouded playground where the voice was calling from. I couldn't see anything, but when I heard the voice calling for help again, I knew that somebody was there. I wasn't sure of what to do. I felt guilty for not rushing over to help right away, but something about the situation made me feel nervous to investigate. I considered calling the police, but I had no idea what was really going on, or if somebody needed help more urgently than they could provide. I put the food in my car and pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight and started moving cautiously toward the playground. I looked around, but I didn't see anyone. I looked over my shoulder and nobody was out walking on the sidewalks or anywhere else. The entire place seemed too quiet, and I couldn't find the source of the cry that I had heard earlier. I almost convinced myself it was just my imagination, and I started to turn back toward my car when I had heard it again. "Please, please help me." I hesitated for a moment, but I pressed on and moved to an area by a domed jungle gym that was tall enough to obscure the rest of the area behind it. When I shined my light ahead, I nearly dropped my phone and yelped out loud at what I saw. It was a young woman lying face down and crawling slowly out from underneath the dome. She was leaving a trail of blood as she dragged herself forward. I panicked at the scene but managed to overcome my initial fear and rushed forward to try and help. Suddenly, the woman on the ground seized my hand and I felt a wave of pain and a burning sensation where she had grabbed me. She looked up and her eyes were bleeding. I recoiled at the horrific sight and I tried to pull away, but her grip was like iron. She stared at me and spoke again through now bleeding lips. "Please help me. It hurts. I can't stop it now." I wrenched my hand free with a pained gasp as I recoiled. I saw a large figure emerge from behind the jungle gym. He was holding a knife and wearing a strange face mask that looked like a stone gargoyle's head. I had no idea what was going on, but it looked bad. A booming voice called out, "Get back, don't touch her." I was confused and still scared of the woman weeping blood, but the large man seemed to be a more imminent threat, and I wondered if he might have attacked her. I tried to stand firm against the imposing figure. I realized that I had my cell phone out as my flashlight, and I should call 911. I shouted at the large man with as much bravado as I could muster, thrusting my phone forward like it was comparable to the large knife that he was holding. "Stay away. Whatever's going on here, you need to leave this woman alone." I tried to subtly dial the numbers with my trembling hands. Instead of rushing forward to attack me, the figure just held up a gloved hand and spoke. "Wait, I know that you won't understand, but I have to do this. She isn't safe. It must be stopped here and now." I had no idea what the masked man was saying. From where I was standing, it looked like he had just attacked her and was asking me to stay away for my safety. It seemed strange, but he did not sound angry, just concerned. It gave me pause, just long enough to see what happened next. In a flash, the woman lunged forward and tried to grab at my leg this time, pleading for help once again. Before she could grab me, I was thrown off my feet by a strong shove from the masked man and I was sprawled out on the ground. I heard an anguished cry and a horrible scream coming from the woman, followed by a muttered curse from the masked man and then a gruesome crunching sound. I looked up and witnessed the final part of the grisly sight. There was blood everywhere and I heard a disturbing hissing sound that was unlike anything that I imagined a person was capable of making. Before I could get to my feet and run and call for help or even scream, he was already there looking over me. There is a split second where I saw his hand move. Then before I could blink, I saw the pommel of the knife traveling for my head. It struck me right in the temple and the world fell away. The last thing that I heard through the ringing in my ears was an apologetic muttering. "I'm sorry you saw this. I hope to God you do not need to see me again." And then there was only silence. I woke up freezing and alone, still in the playground. My head throbbed and I realized that I had been knocked unconscious. The woman was gone. The blood that I swore I had seen everywhere was somehow gone as well. No trace of the large, masked man. No explanation as to what I had just seen and why. As I looked around in panic and confusion, I felt a strange burning sensation on my hand. I remembered the woman reaching out to grasp my hand while she pleaded with me. Her grip had been very strong. I thought that it might just be a bruise. Yet when I looked at my right hand, instead of a normal mark or a cut, I saw something else. It was an odd mark that looked like a deep tissue bruise. The more that I stared at it, the more uncanny it seemed. The mark seemed to resemble a number the longer that I looked. It seemed like the very blood in my veins had somehow contorted and shifted from the pressure to form the number 8 in my skin. Out of curiosity, I pressed down on it, but it didn't hurt like a bruise did. Then I tried to wipe it off, but it seemed to indeed be underneath my skin. I had no idea how it got there, but when I considered the bizarre and bloody sight that I had stumbled upon, I had a bad feeling that I had walked into something horrible, and whatever it was just the beginning. My phone rang, and the sound knocked me out of the daze that I was in, staring at the bloody number that was staring back at me through my own skin. I blinked and picked the phone back up and answered. I heard Cassandra's voice, and she was still speaking, trying to see if I was there. I mumbled an acknowledgement. Sorry." There was a concerned pause, and Cass spoke again. "Are you all right? You sound like you just woke up. I was making sure you were still coming. You were supposed to be here 15 minutes ago and you didn't answer my text. I was worried." I saw the missed text notifications and then held a hand to my head as a wave of pain rolled from where I had been struck, making me nauseous and ready to keel over. I apologized to Cass and told her that I would get there soon. I lied and said that I had car trouble since I didn't know how to explain what the hell had just happened to me over the phone. I wondered for a moment if I would tell her at all. I considered calling the police, but nothing else was there to indicate that anything had happened. That woman and the man in the mask were both gone, and if I had not had the bruise on my head and the mark on my hand to prove that I had been hit, I would have wondered if they were really there or if I was having a mental break. I thought that I might have to tell Cass something better than just car troubles if she asked about my head and what had happened. But I still didn't really know what happened myself. I drove to Cassandra's house in a daze, and when I started for the door, I realized that I had been out for almost half an hour and the food was ice cold by then. I sighed and continued to the door and greeted her. I apologized about dinner and we ended up ordering a pizza instead since she didn't want me going back out again after the time that I had. I agreed since I didn't really want to do anything else that day either. We enjoyed dinner and some time together, and I tried to put the incident behind me. I tried to rationalize the weird encounter as people playing a prank. Maybe I had been set up as a victim, though they didn't take anything if the plan had been to mug me. I played the events over in my head as I tried to sleep, and something felt off. The disturbing look on the woman's face did not look like she was acting or playing a prank. She looked terrified. The odd burning in my hands returned as I considered the strange blood blister on it that resembled an 8. Nothing about that night sat right. I did manage to fall asleep, and I couldn't get the bleeding eyes and mouth of that woman out of my head. I eventually salvaged a few fitful hours of sleep, but when I woke up I saw something else that convinced me something was very wrong. In the morning, I had to go to the bathroom just as Cass was getting out of bed. When I went to wash my hands, I saw something that nearly made me cry out. I saw the mark on my hand from yesterday had changed. I blinked hard and even rubbed my eyes to make sure that I was seeing what I was seeing. But there was no denying that the mark that had looked like somebody had stenciled an 8 into my skin now looked exactly like a 7. And Cass walked in while I was staring at the morbid mark on my skin, and I quickly covered it with a towel, and I made up a lie about how I cut myself shaving. She offered to get me something for it, but I declined and thanked her. When she left, I looked at it again, and when I looked back up to the bathroom mirror, I swear that I saw the glint of bloodshot eyes staring back to me. In another moment, I was struck with a terrible buzzing sound in my head, and an odd flash of heat under my skin, like my blood was boiling or I had a terrible fever. A moment later, the sensation was gone, but I was disturbed that it had happened at all. Something was happening. I thought I was sick, or maybe I had contracted some sort of disease. For lack of other options, I decided to go to the doctor and see if there was some explanation for this bizarre medical abnormality that I was suffering after the disturbing encounter from the other day. Cass had wanted to go with me, but I convinced her to stay home. I was suddenly nervous about whatever this was spreading to her if it was contagious. She reluctantly agreed, and I went to the closest walk-in clinic that I could find. After checking in and waiting a while, I finally got into a room. Surprisingly, my temperature was normal when the nurse took it, and my vitals seemed steady too. My blood pressure was a bit high, though that was normal for me, unfortunately. A tall older man by the name of Dr. Whitaker stepped into my room and took a look at me. He asked some general questions, and I explained my symptoms, and he quickly concluded that I would be needing a blood test. Everything had been going all right up until that point, but when they took out the equipment and found a vein to collect a sample, I got a strange, sick feeling, like something bad was about to happen. I was about to decline and try to leave once they got closer to me with the needle. I held my breath and looked away. I was not afraid of needles, but something about this made me feel oddly nervous. When the needle found its mark and sunk into my vein, I felt a strange surge of adrenaline and a flash of fury wash over me. I heard a scream, and when I looked back at the nurse, the needle had been bent and there was blood all over her and the ground. It seemed to be shifting strangely, like it had some sort of disturbing sentience. I apologized even though I hadn't moved or done anything. I didn't see exactly what happened, but the nurse left and I was alone in the room with the disturbingly large puddle of my own blood as my only company. I wondered just what had happened to disturb her and how there was so much blood from a needle prick. I considered the blood weeping from that woman who grabbed me last night, and I was worried that I had developed some hemorrhagic fever or something. But if I had, why did I feel fine just then after losing so much blood? As I sat and waited, I felt a chilling silence wash over the room, and then a voice suddenly formed in the back of my mind. It sounded like something entirely alien and not manifested out of my own conscious. It said one word, forceful and imperious, like it needed me to listen for my own survival. Run. Without a second thought and against my better judgment, I burst out of the room and ran through the halls of the office Just as the doctor was coming back with 2 men in biohazard suits, they started chasing me and I ran through the door to an emergency exit and managed to force a piece of rebar in the back alley through the handle of the door, blocking it momentarily. There were hurried shouts and commotions in the building as I fled as fast as I could from the whole scene. When I had made it a good distance, I felt sick and collapsed in the underbrush of the city park that I had reached. I was about to move again after waiting to see if I was followed, but I felt a ringing in my ears and that same burning sensation, and I passed out again instead. And when I woke up, I saw that it was nighttime. I didn't know just how long it had been. I had lost my phone at some point. The park was empty and I thought that it might be after midnight. I felt an ache on my hand and to my horror, it had happened again. The bloody mark in my skin had changed. Where the 7 had shown before, a bloody 6 lay under my skin now. I had no idea what the hell was going on, but it did not feel medical in nature. Something was wrong. This mark was counting down to something terrible and I had to find out what before it reached 0. The sun was starting to rise and I managed to stagger out of the park and onto the street. I had no idea what to do now. Were the doctors and those men in the hazmat suits still looking for me? Was I infectious? I considered the bleeding woman who had grabbed me and how since then the bloody mark was counting down to some uncertain event. I had to figure out what was going on before it was too late. I decided to return home and tell Cassandra the truth. She was likely worried sick and I honestly needed some help figuring out what to do next. Before heading back, I stopped by a small store to get a handkerchief to cover my mouth and some gloves. I still didn't know what this was or if it spread, but I did not want Cass to get sick in case it was transmissible. I grabbed a taxi back home and I staggered to the door. I was weirdly tired even after sleeping for almost an entire day. The fatigue was sudden and it didn't feel natural. Unfortunately, due to the strange fugue that I was in, I didn't notice the vehicles parked outside Cassandra's place until it was too late. When Cass answered the door, she nearly dropped her coffee. She rushed over to embrace me, but I pulled back and held out a hand. Wait, I think that I'm sick. I don't know what's going on, but I need help and things didn't go well at the doctor's office. I saw a troubled look on her face and something else that looked like it might be guilt. I know, I heard. Please listen, don't run. There are people here to help you. They said that they were the only ones that could now. I looked past into the house and saw the men in hazmat suits waiting for me, and then I spun around and saw more on the lawn. I looked back to Cass and she had a pleading look on her face. Please stay, let me help you. I'm scared and I don't want to lose you. I considered running, but when I saw her face and heard her plea, I couldn't. I decided to stay and I held up my hands. As the men approached me slowly, I felt a strange heat underneath my skin again. My head started to pound and I swear that I heard a chilling voice whisper to me, "No." Before I could stop myself, I spun around and started to move away. Cass grabbed my hand and I instinctively pulled away, my nails scratching her hand in the process so badly that I saw blood dripping from where I had torn free. She cried out and my fear and guilt had almost overridden the impulse to flee from the situation, but I could not quell the overwhelming urge to run. I launched myself onto the yard and started sprinting away. I slipped past one of the men and another had something in his hand that I hadn't noticed at first. It was a taser and he managed to aim and fire before I could get away. I fell to the ground, my body convulsing and the heat under my skin building to a breaking point. As the others rushed over to subdue me, I felt it tearing at my skin and suddenly a blood-covered tendril whipped out of my hand and skewered one of the hazmat men through their faceplate and straight through his head. The horrible crunch of broken bone and the sick tearing sound of mangled flesh broke me out of the primal urge to keep resisting, and I felt like I was going to pass out again. That concern was guaranteed when another shock followed by a poke in the arm with what was likely a tranquilizer. It ensured my loss of consciousness. I wasn't sure how much time had passed, but I woke up alone and cold in a bright room with no doors or way out that I could find. I would have been able to see better if I hadn't been strapped to a gurney. I could only see scant details in the room beyond my own body and a few angles of the surroundings, but I figured that I had been isolated here for study. I saw my hand was wrapped in a restraining brace, but I saw from the angle that I could see, the shape of the bloody mark had changed yet again. The 6 had become a 5, and the fear and anxiety of what would happen at the end of the count pressed down on me again. I didn't like that I was restrained, but I allowed myself to hope that maybe the people who had captured would be able to help, and if they couldn't, I wasn't sure what I could do. I heard a voice on the intercom in my room, and soon somebody spoke to me. "I'm sorry we had to resort to restraining you, but it has become clear that your passenger is not willing to come quietly. I know you have many questions, but time is short. You deserve to know what is happening, and I will tell you what I am allowed to disclose. But suffice to say we have around 60 hours to figure this out, or something bad is going to happen to all of us." Passenger. I considered the implications and shuddered. I closed my eyes and tried to pretend that this was not happening. My fate was in the hands of whoever these people were, and my time was running short. Something was going to happen, and whatever that was feeling more horrible every minute. I waited for hours at a time in between sessions of doctors and assistants coming into my room or cell and running diagnostics on me, always taking blood samples and generally working around me but not acknowledging my questions about who they were or what the heck was going on. All the people working in the room would not identify themselves, and I had no idea what organization these people were really from. The lead doctor had been in several times to check on the progress of whatever work they were trying to accomplish. I had managed to overhear a whisper referring to the man as Dr. Stillman. I asked him again when he had come in to check on the latest blood test. "What is happening to me? Where's Cassandra? Did you take her as well?" I could not read his face behind the protective gear, but there was a distressing pause and he finally responded. "We're not sure. This is a novel process to us. We only just discovered this particular strain and it is quite aggressive. That is why we've had to take such a direct and immediate action to quell whatever trouble this thing could cause. I'm afraid that's all I can tell you at the moment. Unfortunately for you and a few others, the cause and cure for this affliction has to be discovered at any cost. The rights of a few people may have to be trampled on slightly for the greater good." I asked again, disturbed by the answer, more so than non-answer to the other part of my question. "Where is Cass? Did you take her as well? What are you going to do?" There was silence and Stillman looked at his watch and turned to leave. Before I could shout the question again, he looked back at me as if he was leaving the room and cut me off. "She was likely contaminated by your last encounter with her. She is being looked after by our staff and monitored for symptoms, but anyone who comes into contact with these things cannot be allowed to roam free." He walked out of the room and the staff departed with him, leaving me alone with the silence and despair of the situation. I felt guilty and sick. I had cut Cass when I tried to leave, and I know that I had gotten her sick too. What were they going to do to her? As I began to spiral, I felt the wave of heat in my blood rise again. I tried to calm myself down, but it felt like something was going to break free from my skin. I strained against my restraints, and this time, as I writhed, I felt an odd sensation of quiet come over my mind, and the room was still. And then a creeping whisper was heard in the back of my mind. I froze as I realized it was speaking to me. "One of our blood, leave now." My mind raced and my skin prickled at the ominous voice speaking into my mind. Even if I wanted to follow the instructions of the creepy voice, I had no means to break out. I suddenly felt like I wasn't alone in the room, yet the door had not opened. I heard scratching on the glass of the only window and saw a disturbing outline of a figure through the shrouded glass. And then I heard a terrible, wet, squishing sound, like someone wading through muck and grime and even worse things. I tried to move and I couldn't. And then I felt sick, very sick. I felt a bulge welling up in my throat, and before I could stop myself, I spat out a gob of blood that landed near my hand, and to my surprise and horror, it started to move. I felt a bit of pain and I heard a hissing sound, and then I was amazed when my range of motion had increased. I felt the restraints loosen and then fall off completely, and I heard the ragged sound of breath coming from something in the room that did not sound like a possessed human lungs. I was free but too scared to move. I started to think that maybe I should not leave. Whatever this was could be too dangerous to be let out. But I thought of Cassandra and everything that had happened, and I felt the urge to leave again, to find her and get her back. The compulsion overrode my fear and concern, and without looking at the disturbing figure in the room who had set me free, I burst out of the room in a run. I had managed to knock the door down in my flight. Despite being barred from the outside, I had managed to break it down with a minimal effort, and as I sprinted through the hallway, my ears started to ring and my conscious thought began to fade to the point where it felt like I was dreaming. I kept moving, and as the feeling became so distant, I thought that I would fall asleep on my own feet, like I was fully in autopilot to my own body. I dimly remember 2 scientists trying to stop me. Worse still, I remember just how much I seemed to enjoy the taste of their blood and the feeling of tearing them apart. Yes, it was a vivid nightmare, but the nightmare was only the beginning. The sound of a blaring alarm knocked me back to my senses, and I looked down at the medical gown that I had been wearing. It was torn and red. Before I could react in the proper horror to the scene before me, the voice in my head spoke again. "We are not here. She is not here. Bring us together soon. Go." I had no idea what I had done or what was happening. I only knew that the voice was right and that Cass was gone. The path behind me was covered in blood, and I knew that it was not my own. I had done something monstrous, but I did not care just then. I only knew that I had to leave. I had to find her. I left the building in short order and stepped out into the morning sun. The light reflected off the bright sheen of my skin that showed the bloody mark resembling a 4 now. 4 days left to find Cass and find a way to stop whatever was going to happen to us. I was wandering in a dazed state down a sidewalk. I had no idea where to go, where Cassandra was, or what the strange organization that had taken her was either. I thought again that maybe I should have just stayed, but the way that Stillman spoke, the way that he sounded certain that he would handle the problem one way or the other, made me think that if all efforts failed, that I would be burned alive, rather than let whatever this sickness was spread. Worse still, Cass would likely follow me soon after if they failed to find some cure. I knew that I couldn't go back though, partly because of that feeling of hopelessness and partly due to the disturbing voice that nagged in the back of my mind. A voice that was not my own but felt like it was in my head. It would not allow me to go back to that place. Just thinking about returning caused my head to start hurting and that burning sensation in my blood to start again. I took a deep, steadying breath and continued staggering in the direction that I hoped my apartment was. I considered they might have people posted there as well, so I reconsidered after a while and decided to make my way to a cheap motel near the outskirts of town, where I had been wandering. My phone had been lost, but I picked up a cheap burner from a crappy mobile store on the way to the motel. I got to my room and was relieved when I found out that it had free Wi-Fi. I started looking up any reported incidents of odd illnesses nearby and other things that I could recall, no matter how incidental they might seem. I couldn't find much after searching for an hour. I almost gave up, but eventually I found a strange blog that had a story that sounded a little too familiar to be a coincidence. The person claimed to have seen someone murdered in a fountain of blood by a strange, masked individual. What struck me was the way that they described the mask as one looking like a gargoyle. Normally, I would think the account was from a crazy person, but it was too similar to what I had seen to be anything but a witness to whatever the hell I had seen as well. I immediately sent a message to the blogger asking about the encounter. After waiting for another hour, I had almost fallen asleep when I received a response. "Who's asking?" I responded as directly as I could without risking exposing my identity. "Someone who has seen them too, or at least I think I did." There was a long pause and a response showed up again. "We should meet, Central Park, tonight at 10 p.m. Don't be late and don't be followed. The truth is worse than you think." I had no idea who this person was, but if they could help with any additional information, I would be lucky. It was cold outside, though I kept going through periods where I could feel the chill and where it felt hot under my skin. I had lost almost another day and I was getting anxious. My time was almost up. I needed a solution and I hoped that this person, whoever they were, would be able to help. The park was empty and I looked around suspiciously. I had no idea if the people who had kidnapped me were still out looking for a trail. Despite the isolated state of the place, I felt nervous, like I was being watched. I saw a short man walk discreetly to a park bench and sit down. He had thick glasses and an almost comical-looking trench coat, which made his attempts at trying to look discreet or blend in almost laughable. I approached slowly and was about halfway to the bench when he sat up and looked at me, and then quickly behind me and around the park, likely to ensure that we were alone. "Are you?" I started to speak and he held up a fist and hissed at me. "Shh, not so loud and no names. Wait just a second." He pulled a small item out of his coat. At first I thought it was a gun, but he tinkered momentarily with it and a small dish extended around the knot in the center, and I saw what looked like a directional microphone. He aimed it at nearly all the dark shadows and trees that loomed behind us and around us. Once he was satisfied, he put it away and spoke again. "I can never be too careful. All right, talk fast. Are you saying you saw someone taken by the gargoyle man too?" He has a doubtful and slightly judgmental look that annoyed me, but I answered, "Yes sir, a playground at night. A woman was attacked by that man. I tried to help, but he attacked me too. He knocked me out and he and the woman were gone when I came to." I waited and watched him digest the story. I couldn't tell if he believed me by his expression alone. Eventually, he nodded his head as if accepting that he was hearing the truth. "All right, here's the deal. These people, the ones with the gargoyle helms, they seem to be some sort of group that finds and hunts people who are sick. Sick with some sort of rare blood infection that is supposedly dangerous. The person that I saw get attacked was my friend Max, and his story was weird. He had contracted some sort of illness that had all of the hallmarks of a hemorrhagic fever. The weird part was that it was not hurting him, or at least he said it wasn't. I wanted him to go to the doctor because it was freaking me out. He really was messed up, like puking blood. It was coming from his eyes, but he said that he did not feel like he was sick. He said that he felt strong. I didn't know what to make of it until one day when we were coming back from the bar, he was attacked. The man in the mask did something to him. He said something was inside of him and he had to do what needed to be done. Suddenly, I'm knocked on my butt and the man takes Max and I hear this god-awful scream that didn't sound like him at all. The man stopped speaking and looked over my shoulder, frowned, and then resumed. After freaking out about it, I tried to find out where Max went, but I found nothing. He was declared missing and I was questioned, but nothing ever came up. Eventually, I found out about similar events occurring to people across the state that have all reported abductions by people in these weird masks. Always when a friend or someone they knew had been seemingly sick with something, Worse, they're not the only ones taking people. Some weird government group has been abducting these sick people as well, and taking them away to do God knows what to them, knowing that the government is probably weaponizing the illness or whatever it is. He snorted and was about to continue when I heard a loud beeping from his pocket, and suddenly his expression changed and he looked at me and shouted, "Run, someone's here." I looked behind me just in time to see men in biohazard suits coming out of the shadows. One had leveled some sort of gun at me and I fell to the ground, narrowly dodging a dart of some kind. I saw the man that I had been speaking with taken off his feet as he was trying to get away. I started to panic and felt my chest lurch and the burning feeling welling up again. I tried to move, but I froze and it felt like my limbs couldn't move. I looked down and saw a dart sticking out of my leg. I slumped back down, and as the men moved in with restraints to detain me, something unexpected happened. The man who was bending down to cuff me let out a loose, muffled sound, followed by a wet gurgle. I paused in disbelief as I saw what looked like some strange multi-bladed knife or glaive sticking out of his head. There were panicked shouts followed by actual gunfire, as the men in the hazmat suits fought back against whoever or whatever was attacking them. The burning feeling started to increase and I could feel my limbs again. I sat up and saw another man's head vanish and it came clean off to the swing of a large, double-headed axe. The figure wielding it was unmistakable. They wore that same leering gargoyle head as I had seen before. Whoever this person was, they didn't like the people who had kidnapped me. I thought I heard the figure mumbled something along the lines of, "Blasphemous wretches, forgive them, Father, they know not what they do." I swear that I saw a man in a hazmat suit fire a shotgun at the masked man at point-blank range, but he did not react. His response was neatly separating the gunman's head from his shoulders after the failed shot. Most of the hazmat men were dead or dying, and the gargoyle-headed man stomped toward me, axe raised in the air. That burning feeling increased, and a wave of heat and blood came off my body as I screamed. The liquid seemed to be boiling somehow, and it splashed the masked man, who howled in pain and fell onto his back. Whatever I had just done had stopped him momentarily. I got up and suppressed the strange urge to fight. Instead, I ran as fast as I could. The masked man regained his footing and shouted after me, "You will only die, tired creature. Let me give you a clean death before the society makes you into something worse trying to cure you." He started moving toward me but was engaged by a group of hazmat suits wearing gunmen and was forced to fight back while I fled. I ran for what felt like hours. I can barely remember it though, like my body was on some sort of autopilot. Eventually, I found my way back to the motel, and after checking around for a while to make sure that I wasn't followed, I staggered back into my room and collapsed from exhaustion. When I awoke, I didn't even have to check my hand, though I did out of habit at this point. I closed my eyes and tried to calm myself. Despite the confirmation that I had seen, that meant that I only had 3 days left. The cycle of running for my life and losing consciousness was getting old. I suppose this time I felt safer being in the hotel room. I was grateful that no one had captured me while I slept, though I wondered if I had truly slept at all. I was not sure, but the bloody 3 on my hand reminded me that sleep was not the concern just then. I didn't have long to consider my situation or appreciate my freedom when something ended up coming to me. I heard the door creak open and then a small metallic clatter on the floor. Suddenly, I was blinded by a flash of light and a deafening explosion. I managed to stay conscious and fell back to avoid a strike aimed at my head. I looked up and saw 2 people wearing gargoyle masks. I held up my hands and I tried to get them to stop. "Wait, I don't know what's going on, but I didn't do anything. Don't kill me. I heard from the scientists that there's a cure. Whatever is wrong with me can be fixed. At least I think so." The men paused. They regarded each other after a moment and then looked back at me. One of them stepped forward and pulled out what looked like a silver chain. "Come with us then. If you truly wish to test your innocence, you might help us yet. But if you betray us or try to infect more with the curse, we will burn you alive." I looked around, desperate for an avenue of escape, but I saw no way to get out of there while both of them were after me. I saw what just one of them was capable of in the bunker that I was kept at before. I didn't want to fight two of them now. Even if they killed me, I supposed I would at least get some answers on what the hell was going on first. I allowed one of the figures to wrap the silver chain around my hands, and despite the chain not being pulled completely tight, the surface seemed to irritate and burn my skin. The area around my hand was positively throbbing, and I almost cried out from the discomfort. The two watched my reaction impassively, though I suspected they wore some reaction to my suffering behind the masks. We quickly walked to a plain-looking white van outside, and I was beginning to fear that I had made a terrible mistake. We drove for what felt like an hour, though I had no idea exactly how long in truth. Like some sort of black op, I had a burlap sack put over my head as we traveled, in case I might somehow lead others to whatever base of operations these bizarre people called home. When we arrived, I was marched out of the vehicle and walked for a while till I was told to stop. I felt my blood heating up again. Something about where I was standing was causing the strange feeling again, like I was trying to get out before I took another step. I fell to my knees and thought that I might be sick. I felt a hand on my shoulder and the sting of electricity as I was shocked by some sort of taser. After convulsing for a moment, I recovered. I had cried out. What was that for? Yet before I heard an answer, I noticed the strange feeling was gone. I no longer felt sick, my blood had been calmed. A voice finally responded. For safety, I'm sorry we don't often bring your kind back here. The danger is great, and I'm not sure if Lewis and Frederick made the right decision in trying to bring you in. But you are here now, and we can always kill you later if the plan fails. I had no idea what plan they were referring to, but I had little choice but to cooperate, if at least to find out what was wrong with me. I was marched into another room, and I heard a door closing. Someone pulled the bag from my head, and I looked at a large figure in an even more ornate gargoyle mask than the others. The snarling visage was intricately carved and seemed to have gems studded in various sections of the mask. They stared at me for a short while, and I felt uncomfortable as my eyes adjusted to the harsh light of the room and the glare of that same light reflected off the brilliant surface of the mask. Before I could ask anything, the figure spoke. Welcome, Tainted One. The first and most important question I must ask is, have you fed the blood curse yet? If you have fed already, then this is a wasted effort, and we should save time and kill you in a much swifter and less painful manner. I considered the question and the assertion that they were going to kill me. I didn't know what they meant by fed the blood curse. I hadn't eaten anyone or drank somebody's blood like a vampire. At least I didn't remember ever doing anything like that. I responded honestly. No, I haven't fed whatever this thing is. Please tell me what's happening to me. Am I going to die? The figure paused and reached his hand to his chin, like he was considering carefully before responding. Perhaps not. We will see. Either way, this will be grueling. You'll have pain inflicted on you, but your soul might be saved yet. The time left in your blood, it claims that you still have hope, if only a few days now. But I cannot promise this will work. It could cleanse you, but you may still die. Yet I'm afraid we cannot risk leaving you to spread the curse further or worse, become something altogether different. when your time is up." I looked at him doubtfully and he spoke again. "I will not lie, the chance is slim, but I will not deceive you about our intentions. In fact, I will tell you a bit more about what is happening. You will either die or live knowing that you can never share the secrets you find out here as long as you continue to live." He stretched out his hands and gesturing to the building around us. "This is the Hall of Atonement. You are currently being held by our group, the Society of Hermes. We are a clandestine group of warriors and healers who keep the people safe from the physical and sometimes supernatural threats that might menace all of mankind. It just so happens that you found yourself involved in our little struggle against a very difficult foe." I couldn't believe what the man was saying. I was listening to him talk about secret societies and hidden wars. It sounded crazy. But he continues without even regarding the incredulous look on my face. "The blood phages are a curse, a sentient and spiritual disease that passes on from people to people by bloodborne transmission. I will tell you more about them if you survive, but for now the time is short. You were infected when you came into contact with a specimen that one of our purgation groups was hunting down. Once they have fed, the curse is unbreakable. But for those who haven't, for those whose blood might still be saved, we have a method that could heal you. You must believe that we never meant to kill the people inflicted by this curse. It is only a last resort that we have been forced to do. Yet so many have been lost. Our hearts have hardened and we have been forced to act. You, however, might be the first one that we can save from this nightmare." He gestured to two others in the room with us, and I was grabbed by each arm and brought to another room. Inside, there was a large machine with tubes snaking into odd-looking machinery. A bed lay in the center and I was placed on it. I started to sweat and the fear and burning blood sensation began again. Something felt like it was trying to get out, and I remembered the name the masked man had given this curse that I was apparently inflicted with. Blood phages. I flinched as they led me to the bed. I was strapped down and the two men insisted that once it started, the creature might try and escape. Needles were inserted into veins and I heard pumps whirring and starting. I had no idea what they were doing, but I considered this thing might be some sort of arcane dialysis machine. The thing in my blood raged and I screamed out in a feral roar that didn't sound like myself. I thrashed at the restraints and I felt the horror emerging from my skin. An electric charge struck me before I lost myself, and I felt dizzy as the blood pumped out of my body. I dimly heard a low chanting and I saw figures in the gargoyle masks chanting something. A prayer, maybe. I heard a voice interrupt the chanting. "They are coming. They are going to try and save their foul seed." I saw several of the masked figures grab these oddly shaped objects. Suddenly, the strange things they held let loose a small gout of flame, and I realized the ornamental objects they held appeared to function as short-range flamethrowers. The machine continued its work, and I saw blood being drained from my body. The color was all wrong, and seeing the fluid leave my veins made me feel strange. I thought I would be relieved, but I just felt angry. Something felt wrong. It felt like my guts were twisting. I felt a strange echoing call in my head, a voice that I hadn't heard since I had escaped the facility with the scientists, who were also trying to cure me. The voice spoke into my mind again. "Do not let them take us away. You need us. Kill them." I felt a surge of anger and adrenaline, but before I could act on it, I felt the sting of electricity again and the shock made the voice recede. My mind felt like itself again, but suddenly, a creeping dread fell across the room and in the next instant, the lights died and the backup lights came on. The dim glow was just enough to make out a horrifying sight. The fluid in the tank, the blood that was being drained from me, was writhing and moving. I began to feel lightheaded and wondered if they were going to kill me after all. The last thing that I saw before I passed out again was a brilliant light from several flames all at once, engulfing the tainted blood. The death scream I heard heralded my loss of consciousness. When I woke up, I had no idea how long it had been. I felt weak and drained, but I was alive. I saw the restraints were gone, and I looked at my hand and I let out a sigh of relief when I saw the bloody number was gone. The cure, or whatever they had done, had worked. I heard the door to my room open and the man in the ornate gargoyle mask had entered. "Please, save your strength. We have much to discuss. There are others that you have contacted. They might need our ministrations. You must help us before it is too late." I nodded my head and thought about Cassandra, and I knew that this wasn't over yet. I was moved into a well-decorated sitting room and directed to wait in a comfortable-looking chair. An attendant with an odd mask that looked like a mirror came in and gave me a small cup of tea. I was informed that I had to wait for the Master of Sanctity. That title referred to the leader of this group and the man in the ornate gleaming mask that I had met earlier. After waiting for several minutes, I tried the tea. It smelled nice and tasted good as well. The paranoid part of my mind almost resisted the drink, but I figured that they had saved my life and wouldn't poison me now. I felt exhausted and drained and nearly fell asleep in the chair until the door swung open again. Their leader was there and he sat in the chair opposite my own. He dismissed his attendant and apparently wished to speak with me privately. "I'm relieved to see you're up and about. I must say it's been a while since we have been able to save someone like this. Most victims give in to the hunger and are beyond our salvation. You have a remarkable will." I nodded grimly. I wasn't sure if I should thank him for the compliment or cut through the distractions and ask about what they were going to do next. He continued before I could decide. "Yes, you are an interesting case, though now that you've survived." He paused, considering his next words. "I'm afraid I must ask you something difficult. I must ask you that you help us find those things you've been in contact with and determine their well-being." I knew he meant who might have been infected and when, and I immediately thought of Cass. A pit in my stomach grew when I considered that they might help her or kill her, depending on if she had succumbed to this horrible curse. I didn't want her to suffer for my mistake, and I didn't want to risk them hurting her. Yet I considered the horror of what she might do to others, being manipulated by those bloodphages, as they called them. I thought about how she would never hurt a fly, and how those things might have already convinced her to rip somebody apart. To Cass, that might be a fate worse than death. I made up my mind I would cooperate. I would have to live with the consequences of whatever happened next. After a long pause, I gave him my answer. "Yeah, I'll help you find everyone that I can, everyone that I remember." And the Master of Sanctity nodded his head solemnly and stood up, gesturing for me to follow him. "Come then, we have much work to do. Now that you are here, you will need our help as well. Whatever you do next, you are part of this world, and there are things that you need to have and things you must know." We walked down an ornate hallway with Gothic architecture. Many decorative gargoyles lined the walls, the faces and expression not unlike the masks of the Order members. We emerged into a large hall that looked like a medieval armory. Archaic weapons stood in lined shelves and were flanked by racks of more modern equipment. I saw what looked like a variety of firearms and even grenades and other ordnance. There were also shelves of glass containers with odd-looking liquids gleaming in the dim torchlight. I was shocked by the contents of the armory, but was pulled along into the room, and as soon as we entered, several Order members stood at attention as the Master of Sanctity approached. He made some hand gestures in some sort of sign language and then spoke to the nearest order member. "We need equipment for a new member." I heard the word and almost did a double take. "Wait, what? I thought you just needed my help finding the people that I came into contact with. I never said anything about joining this group." He held up a hand to silence me and tilted his head. "I know you had no intention of joining us. Days ago, you never knew that we existed, yet here we are. We never planned on having you, but the danger posed by the blood phages demands action. Those who know of their existence also know the danger. Knowledge is power. Use that power. You have responsibility to deal with this threat. Even if you were manipulated, you still helped spread the curse. For that, you must sacrifice. You must relinquish the bliss of ignorance. You must sacrifice your freedom to be a bystander and put this behind you. Indeed, you must help us put a stop to this curse. And then when it is over, we may rest and our duties will be fulfilled. Until that day, you owe us your life and your service." My jaw nearly hit the floor. I couldn't believe I was being enlisted to fight in this cult-like order against a nightmarish, sentient blood disease. It was all too much, but I hated to admit he was right. I would have been dead without their help, and if joining them could help stop the spread of this curse, I had little leverage to decline. I nodded my head and he returned the gesture, and several masked attendants went scrambling through the armor grabbing items from the shelves. One of the attendants handed me one of the odd vials of liquid. I looked back at them dubiously, but the Master of Sanctity just nodded his head and gestured for me to drink it. The Kaikian is a necessary protection. It helps us keep up with the unnatural speed and strength of the worst abominations that the blood phages can create. The effect is temporary and there is no lasting side effect beyond some mild halitosis. He chuckled and bid me to drink the liquid. I wasn't sure about it, but considering what I had put up with the last few days, I would take any edge that I could get. I drank the contents of the vial in one swig and the taste was horrible. I almost gagged, but I felt a hot surge in my muscles and an odd, invigorating sensation. I couldn't believe it, but even though I had almost died yesterday, I suddenly felt like I could wrestle a grizzly bear. After imbibing the strange potion, I was ushered into a sort of changing room and was told to put on a strange, transparent bodysuit under my other clothes. At that point, I was done questioning everything and just did as instructed. I was surprised to find the strange suit tightened over my frame once I had it on, and I realized that it must be some sort of protective second skin. And then I was given a large coat, much like the other order members that I had seen before. The coat was heavy and had a lot of small pockets and even a sort of inline utility belt. Finally, I was given the last piece, which I had half expected at that point. The snarling visage of a wicked-looking gargoyle stared back at me from the helmet that was set down on the table across from me. I looked down at it and then to the others in the room. I did not decline to wear it, but I asked one question before I moved to take it. Why gargoyles? The Master of Sanctity answered my question. Humans are weak and frail. They have often been subject to the whims of evil spirits, preyed on since the beginning of time. The blood phages are as much a spiritual disease as a physical one. As such, we have often sought our own monsters to protect us. Gargoyles and other monstrous figures have been used to ward off evil spirits. We may be just humans, but sometimes we must become monsters to protect humanity. The grim rationale made sense, especially in this very literal case of evil spirits and monsters. I reached for the mask and, without further ceremony, I placed it on my head. It was a bit stifling inside, but soon I realized I could see surprisingly well out of it. The others looked on in silent approval as I stood among them. I was a part of the order now, whether I wanted to be or not. After I donned the mask and accepted the initiation into the order, I was taken over to the small armory and given a set of tools. I was doubtful about my ability to fight these things and wondered if there was supposed to be some sort of training program. As if reading my mind, the Master of Sanctity spoke. You survived, you made it this far. There is technique that we can teach you, but the natural ability to survive is the most potent weapon against these monsters. They prey on fear. They infect the vulnerable. Your spirit is more important than any of these tools. He reached to the shelf and secured a short blade with a strange-looking vent on the side of the edge. The tools, however, will help you finish the job. The dim room blazed into light as he pressed a button on the handle of the short sword, and a gout of flame engulfed the surface and almost threatened to reach beyond and ignite the wooden furniture in the room. I almost fell back but saw the other order members standing still as the flame leapt out. I steadied myself, slightly embarrassed by my initial fear, and looked back at the Master of Sanctity. He was handing the weapon to me and I accepted it cautiously. I hadn't been trained to fight humans, let alone monsters made of blood, but this thing would help against either. The other people in the room grabbed various tools and weapons and we departed shortly after. We are leaving now and you must return home. That is where they are likely waiting to recapture you. That may also be where anybody else who's waiting for you would look. I paused at the implication and realized that if Cassandra had escaped, she would be looking for me too. I prayed I wasn't too late and nodded my head in agreement. Myself and 4 other order members embarked in the nondescript van and I directed them to my house. The rest of the order was mobilizing to a different location. I asked why we weren't staying together and found out this other location. It apparently had been hollowed out and turned into a nest. I didn't like the sound of it, especially since more of the order would not be able to accompany me back home. We arrived at dusk and the lights were out. I wasn't surprised and part of me was glad that it seemed empty. I was as afraid to see Cass as I was hopeful. I didn't know if this thing had consumed the woman that I knew and replaced her with some living virus that only wished to infect me again with the monstrous plague that I had unknowingly given her just a few days ago. I wondered if she had a bloody number on her own hand, counting down the days until she would become something monstrous. I tried to shake the morbid thoughts from my mind as we prepared to disembark. The other order members stepped out and beckoned me to follow. We slowly approached the house and everything was still quiet. It was not until we were nearly at the door that we saw something. Our flashlights shined upon a dark red stain on the floorboards of the patio and the door. There were also what appeared to be scratch marks all along the surface of the deck. I felt pressure in my head and heard a familiar voice speaking to me again. It sounded distant but still horribly alive. "Welcome home. We missed you." I shouted out a warning to the others, but it was too late. Something burst from the deck, splintering wood and crashing over 2 of my comrades. They were enveloped in a horrifying mass of bloody flailing limbs. I heard the discharge of a firearm and the attempted lighting of a flamethrower, but both were snuffed out in short order. I froze, unsure of how to help. I realized that I was clutching the sword that I had been given and had to help fight this atrocity somehow. The other order members fell back, and I saw one of them throw a glass bottle at the monstrous bleeding mass. A horrible ear-splitting screech was heard as the liquid inside connected with the creature, and before it could recover, the other order member turned the nozzle on a flame weapon and doused the thing in waves of fire. The monstrous bulk caught fire, but to my horror it surged forward and struck the other 2 order members off their feet with its bloody pseudopods. I knew that I had to help. I started to move forward, weapon raised, and then I heard the voice in my head again. "She is with us. You can be with her again. Soon, so soon, rejoin." I shook my head, as if the act would make the voice go away. If Cass was in the house, one way or the other I would get to her. I charged forward and activated the flaming burst on the small sword and lunged at the monster. I struck the center of the thing's mass, but to my dismay it had little effect. The thing wrapped a bloody appendage around me and hurled me into my own front door. The force was so great that I knocked the already battered door down and off the hinges. I saw stars and almost passed out. I felt like I had broken some ribs, and I looked up in a daze to see the horrid creature on my porch lumbering towards me. I felt like that should have killed me, but I found the strength to rise to my feet, and I appreciated what the strange elixir had done to help. I heard shouting, and another plume of flames engulfed the monster, followed by multiple glass bottles breaking. The screaming was intense, and I covered my ears from the horrible agony of the abomination's cries. I soon realized those cries had been its death throes, and my companions had managed to neutralize the hideous thing. They moved into the house with me, battered but alive. One of their masks had broken partly, revealing the bald surface of an older-looking head underneath. I wondered again about this group of people that I had found myself working with. They were very good at this, and despite my initial fear and retreat from them days ago, I knew they were ruthlessly dedicated to their cause. And before I could ask them how we should do this, I heard a cry upstairs that froze my heart. It was faint, but I knew who it was when I heard it. It was a cry for help from Cass. I knew at that moment it was likely a trap, but it didn't matter. I had to find her. I rushed upstairs, past disturbing tendrils of congealed blood that snaked across the walls. The place was corrupted by this disease, and I dreaded what I would find when I reached the source. The two other members who were following me shouted in unison and ducked back as the stairwell was raked by automatic fire. I looked out the hallway window as I was ascending and saw men in hazmat suits on the lawn. They were dousing the destroyed body of the blood monster with some sort of coolant and trying to secure the thing. Others in suits and body armor had spotted us, and as soon as they saw our masks, they had opened fire when our backs were turned. My comrades stumbled back down the stairs, one of them clutching a bleeding shoulder. They waved me on and produced firearms of their own. I didn't have time to help, I had to move on. I rushed the rest of the way up the stairs and followed the eerie glow of the blood-slit tendrils. They looked like veins leading to the very heart of the evil that had blighted our lives. I threw the door open to the master bedroom and I saw her. Cassandra was there laying on the bed. Despite the horrifying tendrils all around us, she was pristine, almost untouched. I held my breath and tried to determine if I was dreaming or not. The sight was surreal, and I took a step forward into the room and blinked hard, hoping that I was really seeing her. I inched closer and her eyes opened. When I looked into them, my heart sank and my hope failed. Her eyes were blood-red pools with no pupils that reflected the stunned image of my own face back at me. I struggled for words and only managed to mumble, "How?" She grinned at me, and the sight was hideous with her crimson gaze. "I had to escape. I had to find you and bring you back. We can still be together. We can both live out our wildest dreams, free to do as we please. We can be connected forever. All we have to do is let them in and feed them." I looked around the room and saw the emaciated bodies of men in white lab coats and realized that she must have escaped. She was not here waiting to trap me and bring me back to the scientists and Dr. Stillman. She had escaped with the help of the blood phages. I knew at that point that she had fed them. The human husks in the lab coats were evident to that. The revelation destroyed me as I understood that the process that had cured me was no use to her. I sank to my knees. I wanted to cry, to scream, to do something, but all I could do was sit dumbly as she moved closer. She touched my face and her hand was warm. It reeked of fresh blood, and I swear that I could hear that voice speaking to me from within the confines of her own veins. She held my face in her hands and smiled, a genuine smile that reminded me of the real her. "Come back to us. Come back to me." Her nails elongated and I saw the gleam of these sharp edges in my peripheral vision. I had made my choice. I knew what I had to do. I leaned into her and she embraced me and raised her hand up. And then she gasped and screamed as the flaming edge of the burning blade emerged from her back. The cauterizing stench of hot blood was horrible. As I saw the writhing, possessed blood trying to escape its host, and the demonic face of Cassandra crying out, I knew that she was already gone. There was a terrific blast of heat and a sort of haze in the air moments before a bloody explosion annihilated the remains of the love of my life. I thought that I had died in that moment. Part of me wishes that I had. To be with her again, the real her. But I was not so lucky. I was pulled out of the wreck of the burning house at some point by the Order. Since then, I've been recovering here with the Order. I was in pretty bad shape, but I'm starting to feel better. The downtime has made me restless, so I'm sharing my story with you now. The Order would likely not approve of my decision to do so, but perhaps those who read and believe my story will understand the threat that we face, and if they see the signs, they can take action accordingly. The Order still has work to do, and I'm reminded every day that the job is not done. I have to find the others, the doctors, the pedestrians, anyone that I came into contact with. I have to save them, or at least stop them from becoming what I nearly did and what Cass was condemned to. I will never forgive myself for what I did, but I swear to her memory that I'll keep going. As long as those things are out there preying on people, I will be out there hunting them. As long as the bloody numbers continue to count down others' doom, my work will not be complete. Corey, Rain, Big Country Allen, Nelson Asada, Die Screaming, Meat Cashier, Malcolm Black, Dalla Magara, Justin Fotenauer, That One Woodsman, Die Can't Play, Dino, Deggy, MP Massacre 91, Leon Knott, SWAT, Kathy McGuire, Jimmy Griffin, Miss Eldridge, Dragon Slayer 048, Takeo Zarilla, Sanjay Anthem, Sleepy Shroomy, Mark Norman, Mina Lane Kidder, Richard French, yours truly, Omni Rubix, Sonic GMT, Wayward Son, Caleb Windsor, Never Enough, Russell and Flo, Stevie B 7649, Ray Weingartner, Stephen King 04, Shrimpo the Shrimp, Genevieve Sweet, Lone Wolf Sam, Ivory Sage, Lunas TV, I Am Loki 5849, Chicago Born and Bred, Paige Martin, Jacob Bartlett,